sir?" She just stood there, no panic, no orders, 2 words, and the entire cockpit reset. They laughed at her, called her a ghost from a lost squadron, no records, no rank, no right to wear the wings again, until a drill caught fire and she flew through it blindfolded, until a biometric scan paused mid-process, until a scar, half hidden under her collar, made a general freeze mid-sentence. So, who is she really? Why was she erased? And why is she back now? The silence around her isn't empty. It's protected, and it's starting to crack. You're watching Veteran Biker. Tell us where you're watching from and drop a comment below. The fire wasn't real, but the fear was. Smoke filled the simulation cockpit, thick and fast, blinding the cadets packed into the compressed mock-up of a downed aircraft. Alarms blared from every direction. Someone screamed. Another shouted for a reset. The override controls blinked red. Systems locked. One by one, voices began to rise in panic. Except for her. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She stood in the co-pilot's seat. Eyes locked on the flickering instrument panel. Sweat collecting at her brow but never breaking her stillness. "Ma'am, get down!" a cadet yelled. "It's crashing!" She inhaled once, slow and deep. Then switch channel. Manual sync override. 2 seconds. The fire effects shut off. The noise vanished. The simulation blinked out, leaving stunned silence behind. Everyone stared. One of the tech supervisors stepped in from the control room, brows furrowed. "That sequence isn't even on the training list." She turned to him. "It's from a decommissioned protocol. Echo class." He hesitated. "Those don't exist anymore." But she said nothing more, just stepped down from the rig, removed the training harness and walked out. 2 hours later, at Laughlin Air Base, southern Texas, the sun hit the tarmac like a hammer. The woman stepped through the base checkpoint with a bag slung over one shoulder, a plain grey shirt tucked into faded olive slacks and her old boots still dusty from the last state she'd crossed. No medals, no bars, no rank, just a folder in her hand. "Name?" said the young second lieutenant at the processing desk. "Raven Duvall." The young man frowned as he typed. The name didn't populate. He tapped again. Nothing. "Formerly flight captain," she added calmly. He still didn't look up. "This file doesn't have an owner." She offered the manila folder in a hand. "It's not digital." He glanced at it, opened, scanned, then slowly looked up at her. "You're here for what exactly?" "Reinstatement. To be re-evaluated for my pilot badge." The lieutenant blinked. "Ma'am, respectfully, we don't usually offer reinstatement to pilots over 40, especially ones who've," he paused, reading something in the file, "been classified under temporary psychological suspension following a crash incident. That was 8 years ago." He leaned back. "And what have you done since then? Waited for this gate to reopen?" He scoffed slightly. "We've got no slots open for—" He was cut off by a voice behind him. "She's cleared for provisional status." A woman in her 50s stepped into view. Dark uniform, steel grey hair pulled into a tight bun, nameplate Monroe. The lieutenant stood immediately. "Colonel Monroe, she's assigned to Unit 17, Evaluation Track C, but her file," Monroe didn't break stride, "run her biometrics and give her a badge, temporary clearance. She has 30 days to prove she belongs." Raven remained silent as the young officer reluctantly printed her base ID and handed it over. He pointed to the scanner unit near the side wall. Left arm, shirt off, she didn't flinch. The grey cotton came off without hesitation. Her arms were lean but strong, marked by old sun exposure and a few faint scars. But it wasn't her arms that made the tech pause. It was her shoulder. More specifically, her collarbone. On the left side, following the bone's natural curve, was a faint circular scar, about the size of a silver dollar, composed of tiny raised patterns like an etched coil, barely visible unless under light. The tech blinked. "Problem?" Raven asked. He hesitated. "No, just a scar?" She met his eyes. "Run it." The scanner began to hum, then it clicked, red, then yellow, then black. "Level 7 pattern?" he whispered, but before he could say more, Monroe stepped in behind him. "That's enough," she said sharply. "System must have glitched. Run standard clearance." "But Colonel," I said, "oh, ride it. Reclassify under trainee protocols." The screen dimmed. The warning vanished. And just like that, V.N. Duval walked into Laughlin's main quad with nothing more than a temporary badge, a scar they chose to ignore, and 30 days to rewrite what they buried. By 0500 the next morning, the Laughlin airfield shimmered with heat and tension. The first day of evaluation, Track C began under a sky the color of dry steel, with 41 cadets gathered in formation on the tarmac. Raven stood at the far right of the line, silent. She wore the standard training gear, grey compression shirt, dark flight pants, boots dusted from a different war. Unlike the others, she didn't speak. She didn't scan for familiar faces. She simply stood, posture perfect, eyes forward. "Track C!" barked the instructor, a lean woman with a scar running from her temple to her jaw. "Your performance over the next 4 weeks determines whether you touch a cockpit again. We don't care who you were. You are what you log." Some cadets chuckled under their breath. Others glanced toward Raven with smirks. They'd seen the way she walked in yesterday, alone, older, without insignia. "Guess Mom's here to relive the glory days," someone whispered. Raven heard it. She said nothing. The first test was a ground response scenario, a simulated engine malfunction at altitude. They had to react, navigate, diagnose, reroute, and coordinate with tower relay under duress. Cadets filed into booths with VR visors and control gloves. A row of techs and supervisors watched from the control table, logging every twitch. Raven was last. Her simulation began. Altitude 113,200. The right engine is flickering. Fuel irregularity. Cloud cover. No tower contact. 32 seconds in, she rerouted fuel lines manually. By minute 2, she'd stabilized the engine, dipped altitude, and initiated recontact. By minute 3, she'd navigated through a weather break and brought the craft down with simulated ground clearance. Silence on the floor. The lead technician glanced at his data pad. That was a 96.7 percentile. One cadet scoffed. "Simulation must have glitched. She didn't even use the latest relay protocol," another muttered. Raven stepped out of the booth. "That protocol has a latency flaw in high altitudes." The room paused. The tech confirmed. "She's right." She returned to her seat, folded her hands, waited. After the drills, the cadets were released to the mess hall. Inside, laughter echoed through the steel-beamed room. Cadets clustered in groups, tossing trays and war stories. Raven sat alone. She ate with methodical precision, fork never clinking. 2 cadets approached, a short, sharp-eyed girl with a New Jersey patch and a lanky guy with too much confidence. "You're the ghost, huh?" the guy said, sliding onto the bench. "What was it, Iraq? Syria? Or just got tired of being relevant?" The girl laughed. "Didn't know the Air Force took moms now." Raven didn't look up. "You'll forget this moment. I won't." The guy grinned. "You threatening me, ma'am?" "No," Raven said. "I'm remembering who laughs when they feel threatened." They blinked. She returned to her food. Colonel Rudd sat in his office that night, staring at a frozen biometric record. The scar pattern from Raven's scan had pinged a partial match in an archived Echo Viper file, but the system blocked full access. Redlock clearance required. He tapped into the analog database backup, a buried server in the West Wing, found one line, Raven Duval, Echo Viper 0 9 times. Kia, deleted. Clearance voided July 11th, 2018. He sat back. The base had no record of Echo Viper even existing post-2015. He flagged the file, encrypted a copy, and opened his desk drawer, pulling out an old, dust-covered printed operations map with one zone circled in red, Javelin Deep Day 4 of training. This time aerial combat response. Paired teams ran simulated evasion and engagement drills against rogue drones. Raven was paired with Zoe Kim, the cadet who'd scoffed in the mess hall but hadn't spoken since. Their scenario, recon over hostile terrain, intercepted by 3 unidentified crafts. Zoe flew lead. She panicked when the second drone jammed their comms. Raven took auxiliary control, rerouted tactical vision to her side, and used terrain masking to hide behind canyon curvature. She disabled one drone with a back-thrust maneuver Zoe had never even seen. When the scenario ended, the room burst into confused chatter. "Where the hell did that move come from?" someone asked. Zoe stepped out of the sim pod, staring at Raven. "That wasn't textbook." "No," Raven replied. "That was survival." Later that evening, Rudd watched the playback. He leaned in, rewound. The move Raven used, T, wasn't standard. It had only ever been logged in one classified engagement off the books. He tapped a secure line. "Get me General Aldrich." Colonel Elias Rudd hadn't touched the red line in over 8 years. It wasn't just protocol, it was survival. Direct contact with General Aldrich bypassed the layered buffers of command and carried risk. But the name Echo Viper hadn't crossed his desk in over a decade, not since the data purge. And now it had appeared twice. First on a decommissioned protocol used by a ghost of a woman. Then again in a blocked biometric pattern that shouldn't exist in any living pilot. He keyed the encrypted line. It rang once, twice, then a voice. Calm, low, recognizable. "Rudd, sir, we need to talk, privately." A pause. "Is this about Laughlin? You've seen it?" "Not yet." Another pause. "Should I? I'd advise it." Another moment passed. Secure channel open in 15. Click. At Laughlin, Raven sat alone in the quarterdeck library. She wasn't reading. The binder in front of her was empty, pages deliberately stripped, redacted margins flapping like clipped wings. She knew the silence. She had lived in it for 8 years. Her ID badge sat face down on the table. Temporary clearance, 30 days. But no one told her what happened after that. No pilot had ever made it through this program without a sponsor, without backing. She didn't have either, and she preferred it that way. Upstairs in the control wing, 3 instructors huddled over Raven's latest performance metrics. The lead evaluator, Captain Erwin Vale, flipped through data logs, his brow furrowed. "Third maneuver in a row that deviates from standard protocol but scores top percentile in execution." "Some kind of legacy training?" one of them asked. "Legacy?" "She's using patterns that haven't been in circulation since early Echo-class doctrine, pre-2016 stuff. She says where she trained. No, and her background file's half blank." "Half? I'm being generous." Erwin closed the folder. "Something's off." At precisely 2,300 hours, the secure line opened. Rudd sat in his quarters, screen washed in red encryption light. Aldrich's face appeared, silver hair, iron jaw, eyes that missed nothing. Talk. Rudd didn't waste time. Raven Duvall reappeared at Laughlin Base 2 weeks ago, filed for provisional reinstatement. No digital record of her after 2016. Physical scars indicate long-term captivity. Biometric scan returned a level 7 alert. Aldrich didn't blink. Level 7 doesn't exist anymore. My point exactly. Where did she come from? No known re-entry logs. Civilian registry tags her as dead. And Echo Viper? Scrubbed. Just like Javelin. Aldrich's jaw twitched. Only once. Did she mention Javelin Deep? Not yet. Aldrich's voice dropped. Don't push her. If she's back, she'll choose the moment. Rudd paused. Sir, respectfully, why bury someone like that? She could outfly any instructor here, because she wasn't supposed to return. The line went silent. Then Aldrich added, monitor her. Don't interfere. Click. Day 6. The trainees were taken outside the main tarmac to the canyon run, a brutal flight obstacle built into the rocky edge of the base's west perimeter. Narrow dives, tight inversion curves, and limited radar feedback. Most rookies averaged 5 faults. Raven flew solo, no co-pilot, no spotter. She asked for manual controls only. "No AI assist?" the instructor asked. "I fly clean." At the starting point, cadets gathered to watch, a few muttering bets under their breath. A whistle blew. Her trainer engine roared. She dropped into the first dive, almost too steep, but then she leveled mid-plummet with a sharp vector shift and banked into the turn with 3 inches of clearance. By checkpoint 5, the room inside the control tower was silent. By checkpoint 8, instructors leaned forward. By the final maneuver, a dead turn over a gust tunnel, she cut thrusters mid-arc, let the wind turn her, then reignited at the exact angle to slip through the last gate with 0 friction loss. She parked, shut down, climbed out, no applause, just awe. 3 minutes, 0 faults, someone whispered. Captain Vale stood watching from the edge. "She flew that like she's done it blind," he murmured. Behind him, Zoe Kim lowered her sunglasses. "I think she has." Raven didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. After the canyon run, she simply walked her trainer back into the hangar bay, dismounted, and handed off the keycard to the crew chief with a nod. Not a word spoken, not a single glance back. The other cadets lingered by the far wall, watching. "She didn't flinch once," one said. Zoe Kim leaned against a beam, arms crossed. "She's not flying that. She's remembering it." Captain Irwin Vale stepped down from the observation deck and approached Raven as she wiped engine soot from her gloves. "You flew that line like it was muscle memory," he said carefully. Raven didn't stop wiping. "I memorized terrain. Helps when the nav cuts out. That canyon hasn't been in use since the 17 rebuild." The turns were remapped. She looked up at him. "Then I memorized the new ones." He almost smiled. "You make the instructors nervous, you know." "They should be." He paused. "Where did you learn to fly like that?" Raven wiped her gloves clean. "They didn't teach it. I survived it." That night, in the cadet barracks, whispers spread like dry heat. Some claimed she was ex-intelligence. Others said she had been court-martialed, erased, blacklisted. "Maybe she's not even cleared to be here," someone muttered. Zoe Kim sat on her bunk, watching a paused frame of Raven's Canyon run on her tablet. The playback froze mid-turn, showing the trainer ship mid-spin, perfectly balanced between 2 cliffs. It didn't look like flying, it looked like memory. Zoe tapped the screen, rewound. She'd seen that maneuver once, in a leak. A redacted combat vid from a downed recon drone over the Zagros Mountains, posted on a veteran forum, then wiped. She opened the folder on her private drive, found the frame, matched it. Same vector, same cut-off thrust timing, same scar across the tail wing from a shallow graze. Her jaw tightened. She was there. In the command tower, Rudd reviewed footage under full encryption. The scar on Raven's collarbone had triggered a level 7 pattern alert. But something else embedded in the scan caught his attention now. Beneath the dermal layer, microscopic signature nodes glowed faintly. The pattern wasn't just biometric, it was resonant coded. That type of marking was used only in 5 known programs. 4 of them had been dismantled. One, Echo Viper, had never officially existed. Rudd ran a spectral scan overlay. Under the scar, a phrase looped in encrypted pulses. Verify source, Raven. Op-0 9 times. Status unknown. Do not engage, he stared. She hadn't just survived Javelin Deep, she had come back marked. Day 9. The cadets were deployed into a live simulation range, a full-scale airborne rescue mission with environmental variabilities and unpredictable fail-safes. Zoe, Kim, and Raven were paired again. Halfway through the exercise, a fake electrical failure hit. Navigation blackout, comm disruption, storm simulation engaged. Zoe panicked. The backup didn't respond. They lost altitude. Raven took control, calm, precise. She adjusted not just their ship, but the entire squadron's grid sync manually. From the ground tower, Captain Vale watched in disbelief. She's realigning all 5 aircraft off one relay? The technician nodded. She's not just leading, she's overriding the sim. They watched as the squadron reformed in a delta pattern, avoided a false lightning strike, and extracted the simulated hostage with 13 seconds left on the clock. Top score, highest since 2021. That night, General Aldrich received a file in his personal terminal. From Rudd, footage, biometric data, encrypted pulses from the SCAR scan. He stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Behind him, a photo hung in a silver frame. 7 pilots in grey gear, standing before a jet without markings. In the center, Raven. You weren't supposed to come back, he thought, but you did. And the mark they carved into you, it's glowing again. He turned off the screen, picked up a black phone. Prep the jam room, I'm flying out tonight. The scenario was standard. A hostile zone, a disabled aircraft, a stranded crew is waiting for extraction with dwindling oxygen. Every cadet had trained for this. But not like this. Laughlin's SimCom 5 module was the most advanced combat simulator in North America. Fully immersive, real-pressure atmospheric responses, no pre-scripted outcomes. It was designed to push every weakness to the edge, and today it did more than push. It fractured. The test began at 0700. 6 teams entered the dome, each given command of a 2-ship squadron. The mission: identify the downed craft, secure the zone perimeter, coordinate extraction, and survive any surprise incursion. Simulated hostiles could appear at random intervals. Weather patterns were reactive. Comms weren't guaranteed. Zoe Kim was the team lead. Raven was assigned as her wing. From the outside, the instructor team monitored stress markers, cognitive responses, and real-time deviations. Captain Vale stood behind the glass with a thermal reader in hand. Colonel Rudd watched silently. Beginning simulation, the technician called. Inside the dome, the world came alive. Sky, wind, dust. Zoe's cockpit synced first. Visual locked. I have been an economist. Adjust azimuth. You're off by 2 degrees. Raven's voice came across the channel. Flat, calm, Zoe corrected. The others began to move. One team broke too far west. Another misidentified a heat trail and diverted resources. Stay tight, Raven said. Push north 0.6. Elevation dip ahead. How do you know that? Zoe muttered. It's where they'd hide the beacon if they wanted us to think we found it too soon. The ridge loomed. Storm cover thickened. Thunder cracked unnaturally close. Comms cutting, Zoe called. Raven was already shifting to manual. Above them, drone signals activated. Here we go, Vale muttered. The ambush hit hard. A triangular assault pattern. 3 drones pinning the cadets into a valley with shifting wind resistance. One cadet clipped a simulated cliff wall and crashed. Another overcompensated and spiraled. Within 90 seconds, 2 teams were down. Zoe swore, trying to recalibrate. Z-pattern evasive. Rotate bearing. No, Raven cut in. Switch to scatter core. It's a logic trap. What? They're mimicking an AI learning loop. You can't outmaneuver it by the textbook. Fragment, reorient separately, draw them wide. Zoe hesitated, then obeyed. Raven dropped altitude, flying low between false terrain projections. She switched to thermal mapping, rerouted all friend signals through auxiliary beacon mode, and began pinging false signals at irregular frequencies. The drones split, trying to recalculate. Extraction point at grid G-12, Raven transmitted. We go silent from here. And then, nothing. Outside, Captain Vale was gripping the side panel. She just reprogrammed the simulation's adversary logic in real time. "How?" the tech whispered. Rudd didn't speak. They watched as the surviving 3 teams regrouped under Raven's coordinated phantom map. Each pilot now flew with a ghost beacon. The drones, overwhelmed by interference, lost prioritization. Zoe reached the beacon first. Raven arrived seconds later. Extraction simulated, the system intoned. Total time, 61 seconds from first contact to completion. The record had been 109. The dome went dark. Silence, then light returned. Inside, cadets climbed out of the simpods, some dazed, some shaken, all staring at Raven. No one said a word. She unlatched her harness, stepped out, and walked away. Zoe followed. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" she demanded, breath still fast. Raven stopped. "Some of us had to figure it out without simulations." Zoe stared. "That wasn't flying, that was breaking the system." "No," Raven said softly, "that was surviving it." Later that day, the briefing room was silent as the screen replayed the last 61 seconds. Aldrich had arrived at Laughlin less than an hour earlier, unannounced. Now he stood behind the observation glass, arms folded. "That's not a candidate," Vale said, voice low. "That's a recovered asset." Rudd replied, "We buried her. The system did." "Why?" Vale asked. Aldrich didn't answer. Instead, his eyes remained locked on the image of Raven mid-maneuver. Cockpit lit with the red haze of simulated firelight, steady hands guiding a dozen others from behind the front line. He knew those hands. He remembered them burning. An hour later, Raven stood alone at the far end of Hangar C, watching the wind curl dust across the floor. Aldrich entered quietly. She didn't turn. "Wasn't sure you'd come in person," she said. He stood beside her. "Wasn't sure you were still alive." "I wasn't," she replied. Silence. "You shouldn't be here," Aldrich finally said. "I didn't come to be seen. I came to be unerased." He turned to face her. "That scar, it's reactivating, I know. There's only one reason it would." She nodded. "They're pulling data from the Javelin site again." He exhaled slowly. "Someone's digging. Probably civilian contractors, maybe private AI teams. Either way, if that code lights up, the map to everything we buried becomes visible. They shouldn't have buried it. They buried you to keep the rest safe. I didn't consent to that. No one did." She looked at him then. "I want my badge back." He didn't flinch. "You'll have to stand in front of a board with people who signed the deletion order. I want them to see me." He looked into her eyes. "Then prepare for war." The sun hit hard at Laughlin Air Base that morning, casting long shadows across the tarmac as brass and boots filed into formation. Raven stood at the edge of the lineup, her temporary badge clipped to the collar of her regulation flight suit. The fabric still bore the creases from years in storage, and though it fit her form as sharply as any cadet's, it carried the weight of old blood. Colonel Rudd approached the platform with a clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 senior evaluators. Beside them, General Aldrich stood, hands behind his back, unreadable. This wasn't a full reinstatement ceremony, not yet. But Raven had been summoned, along with the top 3 scorers of the training simulations, to receive provisional commendations. "Cadet Zoe Kim," the announcer called. Zoe stepped forward, her salute sharp. She accepted the commendation pin with a grin, glancing toward Raven briefly on her way back. 2 others followed. Then came the pause. Duval. The name fell flat. No rank, no title. Raven stepped forward. She didn't salute. Instead, she stopped 3 paces from the platform, locked eyes with Aldrich, and waited. A silent beat passed. Then Rudd stepped down and held out the provisional commendation, a polished steel insignia with a gold edge. Temporary recognition for exceptional performance during Tier Sim Operation Kilo 5, Raven reached out to accept it. But in that moment, as the sleeve of her flight suit shifted, the wind caught the open edge of her collar. The fabric folded just enough to reveal a flash of skin. And the scar. General Aldrich froze. He stared, not moving, not blinking. The room seemed to contract around the silence. Colonel Rudd glanced toward him, confused. "General?" Aldrich didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the arc of raised flesh, the etched curvature just visible over the clavicle. A faded silver-black ring with embedded microlines, unmistakable in pattern. One of the evaluators shifted. "Is there an issue, sir?" Still nothing. 5 full seconds passed. Then Aldrich inhaled. "No issue," he said quietly. "Proceed." Raven took the pin and stepped back. She never looked down at it. Back in the officer lounge, the silence didn't break. Not until Zoe Kim walked in and dropped her badge on the table. "You know what that was, don't you?" she said. Raven didn't look up. "That scar, I've seen diagrams, topo layer encoding, military-grade biometric threading. That wasn't cosmetic. It was never meant to be seen," Raven said too late for that a pause. Zoe sat across from her. General Aldrich looked like he saw a ghost. "He did." Zoe exhaled. "You were in Javelin Deep, weren't you?" Raven didn't answer, but Zoe leaned in. "What happened out there?" Raven's eyes stayed locked on the far wall. Nothing they'll ever put in a textbook. In the base's upper command wing, General Aldrich sat alone in his temporary office, lights dimmed. He had ordered the security footage from the presentation paused on a still frame. Raven, mid-turn, collar just shifted, scar visible. He'd seen it once before, during extraction, when she'd been lifted from a mountainside crater, bleeding and unconscious. The pattern had pulsed red, burning under thermal light. It was the only reason the drone even found her. Back then, the Pentagon classified it as a failed asset. She wasn't meant to live, but she had. And now that mark, long dormant, was showing reactivation patterning again. Aldrich picked up the phone. "Patch me through to OPSEC. I need full historical clearance logs on Raven Duval, from 2016 to 2019. Physical and digital." The voice on the line hesitated. "Sir, that access is sealed under protocol redlock. Override it." "Sir, even with override, those files are tied to the Javelin vault." "Then open the vault." He hung up. Outside, thunder cracked. A storm was forming above Laughlin. Rain fell hard the next morning. The tarmac at Laughlin shimmered under grey clouds, and the usual drone of jets was replaced by the metallic rattle of wind against hangar doors. Raven stood alone outside the administrative wing, watching water bead across her boots. Her collar was fastened high today, the scar hidden, but everyone who'd seen it yesterday remembered. They didn't speak of it aloud, but the silence had changed. Inside, the base's largest conference room had been cleared for the emergency review. The board had convened, not the usual training evaluators, but higher brass flown in overnight. 3 generals, 1 civilian defense contractor, 2 representatives from the Joint Oversight Committee, and General Aldrich seated at the head. No introduction, no ceremony. "Bring her in," he said. Raven entered the room calmly, her flight suit crisp, her posture relaxed, but every eye followed her like a target had just walked through the door. She stood before the long table, hands at her sides. No one spoke for several seconds. Then one of the committee reps cleared her throat. "Miss Duval, do you understand why you've been summoned today?" "Yes. State it for the record. Because the system can't decide what to do with something it erased." A murmur passed along the board. The civilian contractor shifted in his seat. "You were marked Kia, killed in action, during Operation Javelin Deep," a general said. "You were not listed as recovered. There was no confirmation of survival." "I didn't ask for confirmation," Raven replied. "I asked to come home." Another pause. Aldrich broke in. "The scar you carry is an encoded pattern designed for top-level extraction. We haven't seen one like it since 2018. It activated on its own," Raven said. "When I got close to the vault again." The board stared. You believe your proximity to the base triggered reactivation. No. I believe someone else triggered the archive, and the scar, like everything else in this system, is still connected. The contractor leaned forward. You're suggesting the code in your body is still live? Raven looked at him. You're suggesting it isn't. Behind her, the door opened. Zoe Kim stepped in. Uninvited, unannounced. She saluted, then said, I'd like to testify. Aldrich raised an eyebrow. This isn't a court. It should be, Zoe said. He nodded once. Proceed. Zoe stepped forward, her tone sharp. I flew with Raven Duval. I saw what she did in the dome. I saw what that scar did to a general's face. And I know what I saw in a leaked recon vid from the Zagros range 4 years ago. She turned to the board. Don't pretend she doesn't exist. Don't pretend we're safer pretending people like her never came back. The room shifted. One general leaned back. She disobeyed protocol in every sim. She rewrote the protocol, Zoe snapped, because she survived the things the manuals can't teach. The contractor spoke again. What exactly do you want, Miss Duval? Raven answered calmly acknowledgement. A badge and a flight roster. Aldrich looked across the board. She didn't ask for this hearing. I did. Because that scar isn't just a relic. It's a beacon, and if it's lighting up again, someone is trying to trace it. Rudd entered from the side room. He handed a sealed folder to Aldrich. From the Javelin vault, he said. Aldrich opened it. Inside, thermal scans from Raven's original extraction, debriefing notes never released, and a redacted message dated 2019. Asset Raven confirmed alive. Contain for program termination. The contractor turned pale. One general muttered, That order was never authorized. Aldrich placed the folder down. Then why did it happen? No one answered. Zoe turned to Raven. They wanted you gone. Raven nodded, but the scar stayed. Aldrich stood. Effective immediately, Raven Duval's service status is reactivated. Her flight badge will be restored, and her record was amended to reflect survival and recovery under classified conditions. The board fell silent. Then the rep asked, And what of the scar? Raven looked at her. It's not a scar, it's a signature. Outside the chamber, Zoe and Raven walked together beneath the grey sky. You know they're not done with you, Zoe said. I know, Raven replied, but now they have to do it in the open. Lightning flickered far off over the hills. You going back up there? Zoe asked. Raven smiled faintly. I never came down. The jam room was colder than Raven remembered. Sub-level 4, Laughlin Air Base, a room without windows, lined with carbon black composite walls, signal dampened from every direction. Inside, only one table, 2 chairs, and a pulse-scrambling light above that dimmed and brightened at randomized intervals. General Aldrich stood already waiting when Raven entered. She wore her flight suit zipped to the top. He had removed his dress jacket. On the table sat a single file, unmarked. No guards, no devices, nothing to record. This was a place designed to speak without leaving a trace. Raven sat. Aldrich didn't start with small talk. You remember everything? Raven looked up. Every second. He exhaled, sat, opened the file. Inside were 6 printed photos, all black and white, all old. 7 pilots in one, 6 in the others. Each photo had a face crossed out in red ink, except hers. You were the 7th, Aldrich said. Echo Viper, 9/10 I was the last, Raven replied. He nodded. You were the only one we didn't recover. I was the only one who wasn't dead. He pushed the photos toward her. These were the other 6. She didn't need to look. They died in the air, not on the ground. Confirmed. Their implants deactivated at altitude. You're the only one whose signature flared at surface level. That's how the drone found you. Raven kept her hands flat on the table. Why didn't they come for me? Aldrich hesitated. Because by the time we knew you were alive, the chain of command had changed. Javelin Deep was already being buried. And Echo Viper? dissolved, all records burned, even the drone that extracted your signal, destroyed 2 weeks later. So I was a loose end. He didn't deny it. Raven leaned forward. Why mark us at all? Why carve that code into our bones? Aldrich's voice lowered. Because you weren't just pilots, you were fail-safes. If the OPI ever went critical, your bodies would be the last signal. Self-encoded, self-encrypted, zero-network biometric transmitters. The idea was that only someone still alive could call the truth back. And they buried us before we could speak. They buried you because you made it back. Silence. Raven's fingers grazed the table's edge. The reactivation, it didn't come from me. Aldrich nodded. We know. Someone is trying to pull the original SCAR codes from the Javelin site debris. AI contractors using signal layer decay tech. They didn't know what they found, but the pulse echoed. Your code resonated with the trace and woke up. Yes. Which means someone's about to know everything. Aldrich leaned forward. You're the only one who can stop that from happening. Raven's eyes narrowed. You want me to go back? He slid a black envelope across the table. Red wax seal. The insignia is faint. A spiral coil with a viper wrapped around it. Official. Lethal. Raven didn't touch it. I'll need a team. You'll have 3. Flight capable? 2 wings and a ghost relay drone. She stood. And Zoe Kim. Aldrich raised a brow. She's untested, she's not stupid, and she knows how not to die. He paused. She'll need clearance. She'll have mine. Raven turned. Before she left, she said, I didn't come back to be erased again. If I fly this mission, I will write the last page. Aldrich looked at her, something flickering behind his stone expression. You already did. 3 hours later, Raven stood in Hangar 19 watching the crew prep her ship. Sleek, matte grey, retrofitted for manual override. Zoe approached, half in disbelief. You're taking me? You volunteered, you testified. That makes you harder to erase. I don't have the hours. You have instincts, and you can learn in the air. Zoe looked up at the aircraft. Where are we going? Somewhere no one ever came back from. By sundown, the mission file had been loaded. Call signs assigned. Raven, Viper 1. Zoe, Viper 2. Drone Shadow. Call sign Echo. Launch time 0300. Flight path buried. Objective recover, confirm and neutralize any unauthorized data extractions linked to Operation Javelin Deep. Raven walked alone into the dark, her flight suit zipped tight, her collar down. The scar at her collarbone shimmered faintly under infrared. Alive, awake, watching, and ready to finish what they started. Some memories don't return gently, they crash. The moment the launch countdown began, Raven felt the shift, not in the engines, not in the air, but somewhere deeper, somewhere embedded in her skin. She closed her eyes, and the past swallowed her whole. Operation Javelin Deep, classified insertion, Persian border sector, nightfall 2018. The wind screamed across the mountain ridge, too cold for desert, too loud for silence. Raven gripped the stick with one hand, the other tracing power relays manually. Her HUD had gone blank 12 minutes earlier. EMP interference, no uplink, she flew blind. But she wasn't alone. Viper 2, you copy? Static 3, 4, dead air. Then a flicker of movement across the ridge below, muzzle flash, anti-air bursts. A red bloom against the night. She banked hard, too late. Something ripped through her left wing, hull breach, altitude crash. She fought it, hard, but the craft spun, trailing smoke and heat, spiraling into the black. Impact, pain, then darkness. She woke to cold stone. Wrists bound, mouth dry, one boot is missing. Her flight suit was half torn, her helmet gone, blood crusted across her temple, and worse, her collarbone ached with a deep, unnatural pulse. They had found the scar, and they were trying to open it. The room was underground, concrete and dirt, one light bulb above. Two figures outside the cage door, speaking in a dialect she only partially understood. Biometric thread. Still live. Find the source. Extract. They approached her. One carried a device, cold metal with a thermal scanner. The other held something that looked like a surgical blade. Raven didn't move. She'd been trained for this. Echo Vipers weren't just pilots, they were the code. One wrong reaction could trigger a detonation failsafe. But she knew they wouldn't kill her. Not yet. Not until they had the pattern. She had one chance. Wait! The man with the blade leaned in, tracing the edges of the scar. It had already begun to shift, microfilaments reacting to temperature and adrenaline. Raven slowed her breathing, counted beats, focused her mind, and when the pain came, she didn't scream. They peeled back the outer skin layer. They thought the code was embedded there. It wasn't. It was deeper, bone level. They would never reach it in time. She knew what had to happen next. Wait for the moment when they connect the scanner lead. Override the thermal circuit. Surge the signature. Broadcast. It would fry the scanner. It might fry her, but it would light up the satellite net above, if any of it still existed. She whispered, barely audible. Viper 1, triggering flare. They didn't understand the words. They didn't see her shift her shoulder. Didn't see the scar heat to red. Didn't understand why their scanner sparked, then popped, then exploded with a hiss of smoke and heat. She collapsed, not from pain, from release, because in that flash, just a single blink of energy, she'd pushed the code up, out, and somewhere, she prayed, someone was still listening. Back in the present, the launch countdown hit T-35. Raven's hands were steady on the controls, but the scar beneath her collarbone glowed faint orange. Zoe glanced over. "You okay?" Raven didn't speak. She just looked out at the dark horizon and whispered, "I survived once. I'll do it again." The sky over Laughlin was velvet black when the countdown reached 0. 3 engines roared in unison. 1 jet, 1 wingman, 1 ghost drone with no markings. Raven flew lead. Zoe took the right flank. The drone followed, silent and invisible, its sensors tuned to atmospheric pulse signatures only Raven's scar could match. Altitude 31,000, speed Mach 1.2 climbing. The air was smooth, too smooth. At 0300 hours, they crossed the final civil airspace line. Everything after that was shadow. Raven's comm buzzed. "Receiving partial pings," Zoe said. "Something's reflecting us, not radar? Doesn't feel like radar, feels layered, like someone's trying to see without lighting up." Raven adjusted her sync to the ghost band. The drone pulsed once, then twice. On her HUD a faint grid appeared, old topography overlaid with decay-mapped terrain. She recognized it, the Zagros cradle. They were close. The drone went dark first, 1 blink, then nothing. No error tone, no crash alert, just absence. Zoe's voice cut in, tense. Echo just vanished. "Not crashed," Raven replied. "Cloaked. Someone's hijacked its silence." They dropped altitude. Fast. At 12,000 feet, the clouds peeled open, and the earth below revealed itself. A gash in the ground, like a scar matching her own, etched in old rock and black glass. Her crash site. Still there? Raven's grip tightened. "We're landing. Down there?" Zoe asked. "We don't know what's—" "I do." Zoe didn't argue. They touched down between jagged ridges. Raven's boots hit the dirt first. The air smelled of metal and dust. She walked forward. Zoe followed, sweeping her scanner. "There's something broadcasting here, not wide band, just rhythmic pulses." They reached a ridge wall. At the base, a black device half buried in stone. Zoe crouched. "Is that ours?" "No, it's new." Raven stepped closer. Her scar tingled, not just warmth now, pain. The device pulsed once more, and her scar responded. The pattern on her collarbone shifted slightly, micro-etchings aligning into new configurations. Zoe stared. "It's syncing with you, not with me," Raven whispered, "with my history." She reached out and touched the device. For a second, just a flicker, the world changed. Images flashed through her mind, memories that weren't hers, logs, code, a vault unlocking, a name, operator, Raven. Status, compromised, observe, erase. She staggered back. Zoe caught her. "What the hell was that? They're trying to rewrite the past, recast me as a threat, but turn Echo Viper into a rogue project. But why? Because if what we did back then comes to light, it proves the system covered up a victory they didn't control." Zoe looked at the device. "Can we stop it?" Raven looked up at the jagged sky. "We don't stop it here." She pointed upward. "We upload it, all of it." Back on the ship, Raven slotted the drone's override key. She accessed a dead protocol, Skyfall Trace. It was built into every Black Tier drone but never activated until now. She aligned the device's signal, then paired it with her SCAR. Zoe watched as the HUD flared, a cascade of red. SCAR's reformatting, no broadcasting. Raven opened the relay, data flowed, not just coordinates, names, logs, internal memos, a command tree showing exactly who ordered the deletion of Echo Viper. Zoe gasped. "This is a kill list." Raven nodded, and now it's in the wind. She hit send. A single flare blinked on the horizon. Someone was watching, and now someone knew. They sealed the hatch. Engines roared. As they lifted into the black, Zoe turned. "They're coming, aren't they?" Raven smiled faintly. "They always come when you speak the truth." The message hit Laughlin Air Base at 0437 hours. No warning, no clearance. Just a blinking red line across every secure terminal on the command floor. Priority override. Black Tier encryption detected. Origin unconfirmed. Source key matched. Raven. Op-0 9 times. Colonel Rudd was the first to respond. He sprinted into the control room half-dressed, trailed by 2 junior officers still trying to make sense of what had just hit the firewall. "What is this?" "Not a breach, sir. A dump." "Of what?" The technician didn't answer. He just turned the screen. Rudd froze. Dozens of files, uncoded, raw and verified, cascaded down the feed. Names, operations, internal kill switches. Redacted orders made visible. The burial of Echo Viper. The containment directive on Raven Duval. The termination list. "Trace the origin," Rudd barked. "We tried." The signal was layered through a satellite ghost net classified routing, but the signature matches her SCAR. Rudd exhaled slowly. Then she just exposed everyone. By 0700, NORAD, the Pentagon, and 2 NATO-linked oversight nodes were pinging Laughlin. General Aldrich stood in the operations conference room as reports poured in. Officers moved around him like ghosts. "Sir," a major called, "CNN and 2 independent outlets have the leak. Someone inside the contractor grid mirrored the drop. It's out." Aldrich didn't flinch. He stared at the black screen where the final document was still rotating slowly. Operation Javelin Deep. Outcome altered asset Raven. Status silenced request. He turned to Rudd. They locked her out. Rudd's voice was quiet. "And now they can't." Back in the air, Raven and Zoe maintained altitude over the Black Sector, en route to a NATO base in Cyprus for refuel and review. Neither spoke for a long while. Then Zoe broke the silence. "What happens now?" Raven didn't answer immediately. She adjusted their course by 3 degrees, then said, "They have 2 choices, lock me out or let me in." Zoe frowned. "You mean the system?" "I mean, everyone who believed it was safe to build something without consequence." Behind them, the drone Echo pulsed with a blue streak. The signal had stabilized. The truth was out. At the Pentagon, in a sealed sub-basement 4 floors beneath the surface, a room called Dark Vault lit up. 4 men and 1 woman reviewed the feed. One folder sat in the center of the table, labeled Raven Live Asset, coded Scar Holder. "This can't be buried," one of them said. "No," another agreed. "But it can be discredited." How? Force an alternative narrative. Blame the Scar system. Claim residual trauma triggered a leak. Say the data's corrupted. And if she talks, she already has. The woman tapped the table. "Then we pivot. Offer reinstatement. Make her a symbol. That way we own the fallout." Silence. Then a quiet agreement. News broke within 12 hours. Headlines rolled across every feed. Ex-pilot exposes Black Ops cover-up, Raven returns. Survivor of erased mission speaks out biometric Scar system. Reactivation triggers investigation. Raven's face appeared on screens worldwide. Some official, most from the footage leaked during the commendation ceremony, a still of her turning, collar slightly open, the scar visible like a brand of buried truth. At Laughlin, cadets clustered around terminals. Zoe's inbox was flooded with messages. Some cheered, some warned. A few simply asked, "Is it true?" She only replied to one, "Yes," and she never stopped flying. General Aldrich stood before the Joint Command panel less than a day later. Behind him, the evidence played on a clean white loop. He said only this: Raven Duval was the system's best-kept secret, and then she became its mirror. You can bury records, you can deny missions, but you can't shut down a code that writes itself in bone. When he left the room, no one followed. But within an hour, an executive order was signed. Raven Duval, reinstated full command status asset, authorized for public appearance, military advisory role in a hangar once used for drone tests. Raven stood before a podium, not in uniform, just a simple flight suit. Reporters stared. One question cut through: "Why didn't you run?" She answered quietly, "Because I didn't crash. I landed." Pause. "And because they didn't just erase me, they erased all of us." After the press, she returned to her quarters, alone, except for Zoe. "Do you regret it?" Zoe asked. "No, they'll watch you forever now. They always were." Raven opened a drawer. Inside, a worn patch, old insignia, and a dog tag engraved with a call sign that no longer officially existed. Zoe leaned closer. "What's that?" Raven handed it to her. It read, "Echo Viper 09 times 07. Raven smiled faintly. Now it means something again. By sunrise, the hangars at Laughlin were sealed, not by order, by fear. Personnel moved in tense silence as Raven walked across the tarmac, her new command badge clipped to her flight suit. No escort, no parade, just the sound of her boots on the concrete and a dozen unsaid apologies in every sideways glance. Inside the primary operations building, the new command council had convened. Raven had been granted full advisory access and temporary operational control over Black Tier training and legacy protocol review. But the room she was about to enter didn't see her as an advisor. They saw a ghost. Colonel Rudd waited by the door. "You ready for this?" Raven didn't stop. "I already walked out of a hole they buried me in. This is just another room." He didn't smile, but he stepped aside. She entered. 17 officers stood at the long table. 3 had signed off on the original Echo Viper dissolution. 2 had authorized the Scar system's shutdown. At least 4 had benefited from her being gone. None of them spoke as she took the front seat. Then one cleared his throat. General Carver, decorated, sharp, with the kind of reputation built on silence and survival. "You've caused quite a stir, Captain Duval." "Commander," Raven corrected, a flicker of disdain. "Yes, of course." "Commander." He leaned forward. "I want to be clear. This is not a reinstatement into active combat command. Your advisory role is strictly—" Raven cut him off. "You're here because I broadcast the truth, and because the system didn't know what to do with it. Now it thinks letting me talk is safer than trying to silence me again." Carver narrowed his eyes. You think this changes protocol? I think this exposes what protocol was used to hide. Colonel Vera, another name Raven recognized, spoke next. The SCAR system was experimental. We terminated it because of signal instability, biometric over-adaptation. Raven turned to her. You terminated it because one of us made it out, and you couldn't explain how. Vera went silent. Aldrich entered from the back, no announcement, just presence. He took a seat to Raven's left. This council isn't here to debate Echo Viper, he said. It's here to decide whether what Raven recovered from the Javelin site constitutes a breach or a validation. A pause. Raven tapped her wrist console. The projection lit up above the table, rotating data spheres, each containing redacted logs from the transmission. Everything you tried to bury, she said, was stored in my body. The SCAR wasn't a failure. It was the only backup that survived. One young lieutenant, clearly newer than the rest, asked, "Why store something that dangerous in bone?" "Because memory can be rewritten," Raven said. "But pain can't. You remember what hurts, and the truth hurts most. A quiet settlement." Then Aldrich spoke again. "We have two paths forward. Treat Raven as a rogue who exposed us, or use what she's given us to course-correct decades of operational silence." General Carver stood. "Commander Duval, I don't trust you, not because of what you've done, but because I see what comes next." Raven stood too. "And what's that?" "You become the face of every ghost we try to forget, and they'll follow you." Raven didn't blink. Then maybe they were never ghosts, just pilots waiting to be remembered. He stepped back. The room shifted. A vote was called. 12 for acceptance, 4 abstained, 1 opposed. The motion passed. Effective immediately. Raven Duval, Commander. Operational lead, SCAR Archive Directive. She didn't smile, but she didn't need to. Later that evening, she stood on the edge of the flight deck, watching a new generation of cadets cycle through nighttime drone trials. Zoe stepped beside her, arms folded. "They voted you in." "No," Raven said. "They voted not to be left behind." "You going back up?" Raven's eyes tracked a drone banking hard left. "I never came down. The backlash came fast." Within 48 hours of Raven's appointment, encrypted messages lit up networks across retired Black Ops circles. Forums once thought dormant resurfaced. Contracted think tanks submitted classified white papers behind closed doors, warning of ideological compromise and uncontrolled narrative contagion. They didn't name her directly, but everyone knew who the Scar-bearer was. At Laughlin, Raven kept her schedule tight. Oversight briefings, cadet evaluations, tactical reviews of legacy data recovered from the drone pulse. But beneath that rhythm, the air shifted. Not fear. Control, slipping. But Zoe noticed it first. She caught 2 senior techs wiping a side server, claiming protocol redundancy. But when she dug deeper, she found traces of deletion aimed at the SCAR archive backups. She flagged it. When Raven confronted the tech lead, he stammered, "It's just a purge cycle to manage load." "No," Raven said, "it's a cover-up cycle, and it ends now." She issued a lockdown order on all SCAR-related subsystems and assigned Zoe as temporary co-admin. The message was clear: nothing disappears without her knowing. That night, General Aldrich met her in the empty hangar bay, away from eyes and ears. "They're scared," he said. "They should be," Raven replied. "They built ghosts, and now one speaks." He held up a tablet. On screen, an intelligence memo: private entities mobilizing against SCAR system exposure. Subject identified: Duval Op 09 times. "They're not going to assassinate me, Marcus," she said. "They're going to discredit me." He nodded. "Same effect. I need visibility, not silence. The more eyes on me, the harder it is to erase me again." "You sure you want that?" Raven didn't blink. I didn't survive to hide. The next day, Raven sat down with a civilian documentary crew. An independent team granted access through NATO to film training evolution. She didn't speak about her past. She didn't talk about Javelin Deep. She simply let them watch as she trained a new cohort of cadets in instinctive response drills, manual override techniques she'd once used to stay alive. No narration, no glamour, just flight and truth. The footage went viral in under 4 hours. Clips of her silent corrections, mid-air improvisations, scar occasionally visible under the sun. The comments were split. Legend, living archive, shouldn't glorify rogue assets. She broke the loop. That's all that matters. The Pentagon issued no formal statement, but behind closed doors another meeting was called. Somewhere near Langley, 5 men and women met in a room without names. 2 wore suits, 1 wore stripes. All held clearance levels above civilian governance. "We miscalculated," one said. "She won public sentiment," said another. The woman in uniform tapped a black folder. "There's still one option. Termination? No. Diffusion." They opened the file. A new initiative, SCAR 2, public-facing, limited scope, AI integrated, heavily managed, use the legacy, rewrite the meaning. And her, either she joins it or becomes irrelevant to it. Unanimous vote. At Laughlin, Raven received the offer the next morning. A briefing folder slid across her desk. Top line, Strategic Coordination and Advisory Registry, Tier 2, SCAR 2. She read every line. Terms, public appointment, partial visibility, no operational control, sign-on required disavowal of all past deployments. Zoe watched her close the folder. "What are you going to do?" Raven stood, walked to the window. Cadets were running flight drills beneath a wide sky. One jet banked sharply up, adjusted late, corrected cleanly, just like she had. "I'm going to do what they can't." Zoe tilted her head. "What's that?" Raven turned back. "Live with the truth." She tore the briefing folder in half. That evening she made a call. Open line to press, to the public, to any ear still listening. "I am not a program. I am not a ghost. I am not your story to manage. I am the result of what happens when memory survives. Pause. And I won't let them make me forget it." The storm didn't break overhead. It broke inside the system. 48 hours after Raven's live transmission, the SCAR archive servers registered over 700,000 unique access pings. Cadets, veterans, journalists, activists. Some are just curious, some are looking for names, some looking for their own. Inside the vault, beneath the operations deck at Laughlin, Zoe watched the requests pour in. "Ma'am," a tech whispered, "the system's holding." But barely. Raven didn't blink. "Let it hold." She turned from the screen and walked toward the far wall, the one that hadn't been touched in years. Behind a false panel, they'd found an old secure locker 2 nights earlier. Inside, a backup crystal. Echo Viper mission files, uncut, unaltered, everything. She slotted the drive into the terminal. The screen flared blue. Names, codes, flight logs, helmet cam footage, and the roster, Echo Viper 09x1, Duval Raven 2, Min, Arlen 3, Kovac, Jules 4, Sato, Miran 5, Feld, Dishon 6, Navarro, Reyes 7, Lin, Tamsin, all marked Kia, except first. Zoe looked up. "You sure about this?" Raven nodded. They erased them. Not anymore. Across the country, encrypted terminals began to blink with a message. The dead are speaking. Clips rolled. Grainy footage of cockpit chatter, mid-air exchanges, last-second decisions. One showed Tamsin Lin banking under the radar to save a crippled evac jet. Another showed Deshaun Feld ejecting to clear a missile strike away from a civilian zone. None of it had ever aired. Now it couldn't be stopped. At the Pentagon, a firestorm ignited. The Joint Information Office issued a series of containment briefs, first denying the footage, then questioning its validity, then calling for an internal review. None of it mattered. By the time the fourth memo hit, an independent group of veterans had created a digital memorial wall. Each name from the Echo Viper roster lit up with growing candles. "Don't call it exposure," one vet posted. "Call it return." General Aldrich called Raven that night. "They'll open hearings," he said. "Maybe trials, then make sure they're public." He hesitated. "You're burning their whole framework." "They built it on ghosts," she said. "They don't get to complain when one fights back." Zoe entered the control bay with new news. 2 names from Echo Viper families are asking to visit. Raven turned. "Who?" "Jules Kovac's sister and Miran Sato's father." Raven closed her eyes for a moment, then said, "Book it!" The meeting happened in a side hangar. No cameras, no uniforms, no scripts. Kovac's sister, Marla, brought a picture. Jules in flight gear, mid-laugh. Sato's father bowed deeply before saying a word. "Thank you," he said simply, "for remembering." Raven didn't cry, but she bowed back. And when they left, she stood at the edge of the hangar door for a long time. Zoe joined her. "I thought this was about revenge," she said quietly. Raven shook her head. "Not revenge. Correction." Zoe looked away. "Then what comes next?" Raven stared at the clouds above. "They'll offer more deals. Rewrite history, not to silence it, but to claim they meant it all along. And what will you do? I'll make sure history has a scar." 2 days later, Raven addressed the cadets formally for the first time. She stood in the central training hangar, beneath the old strike banners, in flight gear, not dress uniform. Every seat was full. Zoe stood to the side, recording. Raven looked out across the sea of new eyes. "I'm not here to be a legend," she began. "I'm here because someone tried to erase me and failed." She tapped her collarbone. "They marked me to contain a system, but that system outlived them." She pointed at the cadets. "You carry that system now. Not the tech, the choice, the question. Who do you fly for? What will you remember when they try to make you forget? No applause, just stillness." And then a few cadets stood. Then more, a silent salute to one who was never meant to return. And did. They called it a hearing, but the room looked more like a tribunal. 4 flags lined the wall behind the long desk. US, NATO, Strategic Joint Command, and an older banner with faded lettering, Ares Legacy Division. Raven stood alone at the center podium. No legal counsel, no uniform, just a flight jacket zipped halfway, the collar open slightly, scarf faintly visible to every camera present. The lead chair was held by General Corwin Dace, an administrative warhorse who'd spent decades making operations vanish from paperwork. To his right, 2 Civilian Defense Committee members. To his left, a young officer from the Department of Veteran Oversight, Lieutenant Cassandra Rames, barely 30. "This hearing," Dace began, "is to determine the legal standing and security implications of Commander Raven Duval's actions in reactivating and disseminating classified material pertaining to Operation Javelin Deep and Unit Echo Viper 09 times. He did not welcome her. He did not thank her. She waited. Rames was the first to break the rhythm. "Commander Duval, are you aware that you've breached 5 federal protocols regarding unauthorized decryption and dissemination of biometric integrated combat records?" Raven's voice was level. "No, I overrode them. I didn't breach anything. The system recognized me. It always did." There was a murmur in the back. Dace cut in. "Your sarcasm doesn't help your case."
"It's not sarcasm," Raven said. "It's data."
She lifted a hand console and flicked her wrist. The panel behind her fled to Lee, displaying the real-time digital readout from her SCAR's embedded thread. Biometric key active. Timestamp, present, authorization path tier 0, Legacy access 09 times your own system says I was never revoked. Rames leaned forward. Why now? Because I had to make sure I wasn't the only one left. Day stared at her. This isn't about trauma, Commander. It's about governance. Chain of command. Do you understand the cost of unilateral exposure? I understand the cost of silence. A pause. Then she continued, you buried a unit because one of us got out alive. You rewrote our names. You told our families we died in an engine fire. You tested scar-based encryption on our bones. And when the test succeeded, you killed the record instead of admitting what we carried was too dangerous to lose control of. One of the civilians shifted uncomfortably. Rames looked down, then back up. What do you want now? I want the others acknowledged. I want every member of Echo Viper posthumously reinstated with full honors. I want the Scar archive publicly archived and protected. And I want this hearing broadcast without redactions. Day slammed his hand on the table. This isn't a negotiation. Raven stepped forward. Neither was survival, and yet here I am. Outside the crowd waited, not protesters, not supporters, witnesses, pilots in civilian clothes, family members, defense workers, young cadets who'd seen the footage and came to see the person the system couldn't erase. Zoe stood at the edge with a press credential hanging crookedly around her neck. She held a mobile screen showing the live feed. "He's trying to shut it down," a voice said beside her. She turned. It was Colonel Rudd. They cut the satellite's uplink 5 minutes ago, switched to internal-only archive mode. Zoe didn't hesitate. She reached into her coat and pulled a small grey stick, transceiver grade. "Then we go external." Rudd raised a brow. "You have uplink authority?" "No," Zoe said. "But she does." She tapped a key. The scar on Raven's clavicle, visible in the feed, pulsed faint red. The room's feed flickered, then reconnected to everyone. Inside, Raven didn't stop speaking. "You think keeping it buried keeps you safe. But every time you erase a name, you create a question. Every time you redact a record, you leave a blank space. I filled mine. Now the others deserve theirs back." The display behind her rotated again, this time showing mission footage from Echo Viper's last recon run. You could hear Lynn's voice over comms. "Calm. Direct. We've got radar burn 6 clicks out. I'm breaking high. Reyes, take the flank. Duval, you're the fallback if we don't loop back. Copy?" "Copy," came Raven's younger voice. Dace motioned to cut the feed. It didn't respond. The scar was overriding internal controls. Rames whispered, "She's not bluffing." The civilian committee member leaned over. "What do we do?" Dace didn't answer, because the feed was still rolling, and now it was being shared, outside, to the base, to the networks, to the world. The ghosts were speaking, and Raven stood in the center, unafraid. They didn't vote that day. They didn't need to. The world had already decided. By the time the tribunal chamber cleared, the broadcast had reached over 17 million unique devices. From military forums to civilian feeds, the footage of Echo Viper's final mission, of voices once erased, circulated like oxygen. Raven stood alone in the empty room, the lights dimmed now. She looked up at the flag of the Ares Legacy Division, faded, frayed, but still hanging. She walked out without waiting for clearance. Outside, the air felt lighter, not because it was over, but because it had finally begun. Zoe met her on the tarmac. "They're asking for interviews, statements, morning shows." Raven shook her head. "They want a redemption arc, not the truth." Zoe offered a small smile. "So, what do we give them?" Raven looked at the sky. Silence. For now. They walked together toward Hangar 3. Inside, the simulator bays had gone quiet. Only one screen still flickered, replaying Raven's final speech to the cadets. Someone had typed underneath, "You don't fly to be seen. You fly so no one else gets erased." Raven turned off the screen. 3 days later, The Department of Veteran Oversight issued an unprecedented directive. All members of Echo Viper 09 times posthumously reinstated. All biometric protocols tied to Scar Thread legacy encryption have been declassified. Raven Duval was awarded the Vigilance Star, rarely given, and never to someone thought dead. The medal was mailed. No ceremony, no speech, just a small velvet box. Raven placed it in a drawer beside a torn Scar 2 folder. Weeks passed, then months. A new training cycle began. Raven didn't instruct, she observed quietly. The cadets flew better now, not because of her, but because they remembered her. Every time one banked left too early, they corrected, not from data, from instinct. Every time a hesitation crept in, someone would murmur, "Ask what Raven would do." No shrine, no altar, just memory flying forward. Zoe found her one morning at the edge of the field. "Someone's here to see you." Raven turned. A young woman approached. No insignia, no badge, just a black shirt and calm hands. "My mother flew with you," she said softly. "Name?" Raven asked. Tamsin Lin. I was named after her." Raven blinked, then smiled. They didn't speak more than that. But they stood together in the silence for a long time. In the final month of the year, a wall was repainted at the base. Near the South Tower, an old mural had faded beyond recognition. It was replaced with a single image, 7 silhouettes, walking side by side, no names, no titles, just a single line beneath, "We were here. That's enough." Raven left Laughlin quietly one dawn. No farewell address, no send-off. Zoe found a note on her desk. "The sky doesn't belong to memory, it belongs to motion. I'll be where it moves." She left behind a sealed packet. Inside, training schematics, override drills, and a final encrypted key labeled, "For cadets who ask." Zoe never opened it. She didn't need to, as she already knew what it said. Months later, a cadet posted a shaky video from a ridge near the Mojave. A single dark jet flying low, too fast, too quiet, no tags, no beacon, just a glint of silver under its wing and a scarlet shimmer where the collarbone would be. The video ended with a whisper, "She's still flying," and the comments below read like a chorus, "Legacy undeletable. Some ghosts keep watch. Scar isn't a flaw, it's proof you came back. You've just witnessed the story of a name they tried to erase and a legacy that refused to stay buried." Raven Duval was never supposed to fly again. She was never supposed to speak. And most of all, she was never supposed to be remembered. But memory has a way of surviving. Even when it's carved into silence, even when it's sealed beneath scars, even when the sky turns its face away, history finds a way to look back. What does it mean when the system marks you for deletion, yet fails? What happens when the record they tried to burn becomes the fire that lights others? What if silence becomes strategy and trauma becomes transmission? Across bases, airfields, and broken hangars, cadets now whisper her name, not because it's in a textbook, but because they've seen what survival looks like when wrapped in quiet defiance. They've seen the scar. They've heard the voice in the grainy footage. They've felt the weight of absence reshaped into purpose. In some corners of the world, medals still outshine names. But in Raven's story, it was the forgotten that reclaimed the light, not through vengeance, but through remembrance. Because remembering isn't passive. It's an act of resistance. So what about us? Do we remember only the headlines, only the decorated? Or do we remember the silences, the scars that spoke louder than medals ever could? Do we allow our systems to define worth by visibility? Or do we ask what was lost when they redacted, when they deleted, when they chose not to remember? Today, maybe someone walks a little taller because they heard her story. Maybe someone checks their reflection and sees that a flaw might be a map, a burn might be a bond, a scar might be the signature of someone who came back and chose to rise again. Maybe someone somewhere dares to whisper the name they were told to forget. And maybe that's how legacies begin, not from brass walls, but from voices that refuse to vanish. So if you're still watching, ask yourself, what will they try to delete from you? And what will you fight to preserve? Whose silence are you still carrying? And what story still needs to surface? Because in every system that buries truth, there comes a day it unearths itself. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one holding the key. You're watching, veteran biker. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. And if Raven's story moved you, share it. Let someone else know. Legacy isn't what survives the system. Legacy is what breaks it. It's the scar that glows in the dark, the name that won't stay deleted. Subscribe, like, and join us again for more stories they never wanted told. We'll be here, waiting, ready for the next name they try to bury and the next ghost that rises.